that higher level of order, you have the taste of sugar. So when you break things down into smaller and smaller parts, what you lose is the organization of the system. And you can't understand the complexity of the system by looking smaller and smaller at its parts. You have to understand the workings of the system, the pattern of the system. So the components are important, but the pattern of organization and the levels of order are important as well to understand how a system works. And so in all of the modern sciences, especially when they're applied to the life sciences, you can't understand the workings of the whole, the larger organism, by breaking it down into smaller and smaller components.
Let's talk a little bit about the effect that thinking has on the body. It's been said that disease is often psychosomatic. Is that the case?
People often talk about things being psychosomatic, so to speak. And of course, when you appreciate that mind and body cannot be disconnected in any way, that mind is just the process of any living system, then we know that mental life is very much a part of physical life. The perfect example of that is pain. Pain has its origins in what we call nociception. There's receiving sites that these receiving sites in the nervous system which go to certain areas of the brain, and then what happens? It's not really pain until there's a mental evaluation of that. So that pain requires an evaluation in mental life. When you're unconscious, you don't actually feel pain. You feel pain when you're conscious. It's part of mental life. But then again, what isn't? So the idea of things being psychosomatic, I suppose that idea has been around for a very long time. And even the founder of modern psychiatry, Sigmund Freud, back in his day was a very accomplished neurologist who translated texts in neurology amongst 3 or 4 different languages, began to really take note and think about some of the things he would observe in his neurology clinic. For example, people who had seemingly impossible neurological findings, like glove anesthesia that didn't follow a particular nerve distribution, which led him to think about this paradigm that perhaps mental life can affect what's going on in the body. And actually, there's been numerous studies and just a wealth of scientific validation that substantiates that what goes on in mental life certainly affects the body. How could it not? Again, seeing the mind-body as an integrated whole. There were studies shortly after Pavlov's studies of conditioning that we could condition an immune response. In fact, I can remember being a university student in the 80s where we conditioned an immune response in mice. Something that was a neutral stimulus, the odor of camphor, could actually change the level of natural killer cells, one of the white blood cell types that most mammals have that ward off infections and viruses and things like that. So the fact that something that we perceive, which mental life certainly could be extended even beyond that, but anything we perceive from the environment is part of mental life. And keeping in mind that perception, cognition is the process of any living system, that all of those things can affect our physiology. How could they not?
So what would self-hatred do to the body?
So our perceptions about ourselves affect how we feel and what our health status is. There have been numerous studies to support, for example, that when one is in a state of distress, anxiety, depression, at a point of major life transition, that they're more prone to illness, and that immune function is different. and that white blood cells respond differently. So that what's going on in mental life affects what's going on in physiology, really, that mind and body are one and the same, flip sides of the same coin, really has been shown over and over and over again. Even something as simple as, there was a great experiment done Stanford University, I believe, where people were given the task of eating something decadent. I think it was a piece of chocolate cake, or perhaps they chose what the decadent thing was. And the people who did it with a sense of guilt and shame actually experienced a transient decrease in immune function, whereas those who were able to just enjoy the experience and savor this wonderful whatever that they put in their mouths actually had a surge in immune status. I think they looked at IgA or IgG levels.
There you go. Love your food. Okay, let's just go further then. What is, are there any, in the research that you've done, have you seen connections between cancer and certain emotional states?
One's emotional state actually affects how one copes with and works through almost any illness state. For example, we recently here at Thomas Jefferson received a grant to look at cancer patients. It's been actually long known in the cancer literature that if people receive adequate emotional support, group intervention, those kinds of things, that their health-related quality of life is enhanced. And in original studies done by Dr. Spiegel, there was actually an increase in longevity. The original breast cancer group that he looked at, there was a longer survival time. It's really debated in the literature if those kinds of interventions increase survival time. But what is not debated, what is very clear, is that certain types of interventions actually can enhance the quality of a person's life, regardless of their disease state. So somebody who's suffering in terms of their distress level and how well they're able to enjoy life, that suffering can be decreased by addressing what's going on in mental life.
Are you willing to suggest, though, that, as we're talking about interventions, though, but are you willing to suggest that the mind state may actually manifest the disease?